Hello.
You boys like Mexico?
That's right, we're going to Mexico. Hello, I am Reasonable Rex, the T-Rex you can trust. And here we are at the third episode of Season 15 of King of the Hill, titled Searching for Bobby Fischer. This episode opens up at Rabada Chang, which is the restaurant that Bobby partially owns and is the main chef at. Here we see Bobby, Connie, and Ola, who is Connie's roommate that she tried to set Bobby up with in the previous season, are all hanging out while talking about TV and how today's shows make it seem like young adults are just all about sex, and nothing else. Which, of course, the GOAT himself, the funniest character in the revival seasons, Joseph comes in and just proves their point, as he's looking for someone to go with him to Mexico. I adore Joseph's character in these newer seasons. He is the funniest character. I always make statements about how King of the Hill is far funnier than people probably give it credit for. I feel like they've hit a stride of humor with Joseph that they've never had before. We do see that Joseph could be doing a little bit of flirting with Ola, maybe trying to hook up with her. I don't think anything's going to come from this. I think he's just shooting his shot in any direction that he can. But, you know, hey, it might be a little bit of a plot point if they get together later on. I also like to point out that he says, like, hey, we can smash first. Basically just trying to sleep with her, and she turns him down, which is something she was willing to do with Bobby after their first, meeting. That's not really what I want to focus on here. If you look at John Redcorn, Joseph's biological father, he was constantly sleeping with women. It kind of was his only character defining trait, was that he slept with so many different women. And it's really funny that Joseph is trying the same thing, but he just doesn't nearly have the presence or game to actually get there. Bobby turns down going with him because he wants to hang out with Connie. And here we get a little bit of a good and a little bit of a bad relationship moment where Connie's kind of encouraging him to go. Now, it's a good thing that Bobby takes interest in what she does, saying that he likes to watch her solder, but it also is kind of clear that, you know, she needs a little bit of space. Don't be afraid to let your partner kind of live their own life while you're with them, you know? So, with her encouragement, he says, we're going to Mexico. Next up, we get Bobby at his childhood home looking for his passport while Hank sort of belittles him for not having it at the ready, you know, not the day before their trip, but having it ready way in advance. Also, I want to point out that the things he's looking through on the ground, we see the tarot cards from when he tried to become a wizard in the episode Witches of East Arlen. We also see Saglug's mirror, which is from the episode Won't You Pee My Neighbor, where they think that Bobby's a reincarnated llama. And I don't really know where that bear is from. Not off the top of my head. If you know, let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, we see when Bobby finds his passport that he used to have blue hair. Hank mentions that he has a lockbox in his bedroom where he keeps all of his important documents. And this is sort of the main plot of the episode. Technically, it's the main conflict, where Hank is overly prepared, he's always ready, he's the guy with the plan for every situation, while every time he brings up something to Bobby, he says, I'll get around to it. He ends up offering Bobby a list of things you should do before you travel to another country, specifically Mexico, because living in Texas, it's something they did quite a bit, even in the older seasons of the show. Bobby realizes he doesn't know how to buy Mexican car insurance, and so Hank just sighs and says, okay, I'll take care of it, with Bobby leaving the list completely behind and ignoring it. Hank then tries to call up the Mexican car insurance company, but he gets put on hold immediately. And while on hold, we hear that it's playing Chuck Mangione's Feel So Good. Chuck Mangione was a very big part of the original show, and sadly he passed away last year. He is one of the best side characters from the show. He's tied to a lot of jokes, a lot of stories. We even have an episode that features him prominently where he was living in the Megalomart. It's nice to see they're paying a little bit of an homage to him and remembering how much he meant to the show. We then instantly cut to Mexico where we see Bobby and Joseph arriving at their hotel. It is a lavish hotel, but unfortunately, they're not on the registration for any rooms. We also get to see that he learned much from his, I guess, adopted father, his real dad, the guy who raised him, whatever you want to call Dell, and he has several aliases that he uses whenever he's traveling. However, the reason that they don't have a registration is he forgot to hit confirm. already, when I was watching this episode before we even got too far into it, I could see that the whole point of this was Bobby seeing like, oh, this is how Hank sees me. It's kind of like when you watch those Saturday morning cartoons and they're like, hey, did you know lying is bad? And they're like, well, what if I use lying to get us a bunch of money or get the things we want? And by the end of the episode, they learn, hey, lying's bad. Like you can see it coming from a mile away, but I still appreciate it. Bobby and Joseph end up missing out on a twerking contest where they could apply as judges if they were hotel customers, which sadly they're not. And honestly, I gotta ask, how does one judge twerking? Is there specific criteria? Like, do they have to be making movements in the golden ratio? Like, how do you judge that? Or is it just whichever girl you like best? In which case, the twerking doesn't matter. Have no fear, because Joseph found someone where her and her sister own a bed and breakfast, and one of their guests just canceled, so they have an opening. I love the fact that she drops one of Joseph's aliases, meaning he used that with her, and it's clearly set up to be like a bad feeling sort of interaction. We're told that the bed and breakfast is up in the mountains. She tells them to just follow her car, which looks rugged and rough and wore down, and the minute Bobby puts up any resistance to the idea, she starts tempting him with delicious food. This looks like someone who's, trying to scam them, or maybe even worse things, looking at what each character wants and breaking them down. I have no doubt that she was just previously flirting with Joseph to get his attention. Noticing that obviously Bobby is a slightly heftier guy, started tempting him with delicious food. Which works. They decide they're going to go to this bed and breakfast. This is of course a perfect setup for the next scene where, hey, look at Caesar! I'm so glad he's sticking around. I hope that Caesar stays for this season and, any other season they have. Even though I said I think he's a little scrungly, he is a good boy. Anyway, this was a setup for this scene where the police call and say that their son is in jail, that there was a car crash and that he is liable and he needs money, and his replies are very robotic, but they don't pick up on that, and they send the money immediately through the link. They then rush to Nancy because they're like, oh God, he didn't even say anything about Joseph. Maybe Joseph's okay. And they're like, well, he would have told us if Joseph had been injured. So they rush to Nancy's house and realize they've been scammed because they're on a video call with Nancy where Bobby's chilling in the pool, and we find out that the bed and breakfast is not only real, it's gorgeous. Hank then goes to the police because he wants to not only report the crime, but he wants immediate justice. This is kind of how Hank's brain works. When someone does something wrong, they should be punished, and if they're not punished, everyone should do everything they can to stop them and punish them, which is of course not how it works in the case where somebody online scammed you, because they basically disappear into the millions and billions of people online, which of course upsets Hank greatly because he's like, hey, we pay your taxes, you're not even gonna try and stop these people. Peggy then mentions that she has a police benevolence sticker and that should give them special treatment, and she was gonna use it to get out of a speeding ticket, but she's got her good looks. God, I love Peggy. She is so funny. I get why people dislike her, but she makes me laugh. The police officer says there's not anything they really can do. The best they can offer is sending them to a class that teaches them how modern day scams work and how to avoid them. We then see Hank commiserating with his friends in the alleyway, as he does often, and he's upset obviously that he got scammed because this is something that he doesn't believe should happen to him. He's so careful. We of course learn that Bill has fallen for almost any scam, especially if it's someone showing any sort of interest in him, while Dale goes through the numerous ways he goes to be completely off the grid. The complete opposite end of Bill, instead of trusting everything, he trusts no one and basically doesn't live a life. He's just constantly hiding, and he offers his services to Hank. Now we're at the border back to Texas. The boys are leaving Mexico, where we see that Bobby is burnt to a crisp. The reason he's burnt is because Joseph didn't get new sunscreen and didn't know that it can actually expire. We also see that he's afraid that he lost his passport while he was in Mexico, which is a terrifying thing. You want to protect that at all costs. However, it's just in his lap. He's not really paying attention to where he set it down as he gets ready to cross back into the border. This is of course feeding more into that plot point I mentioned earlier. He's a representation to Bobby what Bobby is to Hank. Now we get into the class where it's all about seniors avoiding phishing and scams, or SAPs, which of course Peggy immediately takes a problem with because she says she's not a senior. And I love this character that they have here at the side. Her name is Marianne. She is hilarious. Peggy's strong personality here is also super hilarious. She takes a problem with being called a senior and interrupts the class to state as much. And then whenever he's like, well, you got scammed, she's like, no, I didn't. My husband did. And he's like, well, hey, can you just quiet down? And she's like, well, I see what you're doing, but I'm going to allow it. Peggy, King of the Hill would truly not be the same show without you. Hank doesn't really want to live online. He just wants to find a way to punish the person who scammed him, and that's not exactly gonna happen. The man giving the lesson shows off an email and says like, hey, what's wrong with this email? And Hank is called upon to call out what's wrong, and he cannot tell, to which Marianne loudly interjects that the email is fake. Marianne, why are you in this class? What did you do? Are you an online criminal mastermind? Have you turned from black hat hacker to a white hat? I'd really like to know the story behind Marianne. I'm very interested. Hank is then offered some anti-scam hardware for $100, which Hank is willing to pay immediately without any question. To which he's then told like, hey, this is a scam. I was trying to show you right here how easy you're being scammed and you fell for it. We then cut back to the Hill house where Hank is just drilling holes in a 2x4. This is because whenever he's working with his tools, it's a way for him to center himself and sort of deal with his emotion. Bobby brought Hank a shot glass that says tequila made me do it from Mexico. Bobby, in the last episode, you literally said you're a great gift giver. I am calling BS. When has Hank ever drunk anything other than his favorite type of beer? You do not put beer in a shot glass. There are so many other things you could have got for your father that he would have enjoyed far more. Bobby is here to check up on his father after being scammed because he knows how much that's going to hurt him. And Hank mentions that, hey, actually, I'm angry at you because you're the reason I got scammed. Bobby's like, what do you mean that I'm the reason? He's like, well, I got scammed because I was worried about you always being incompetent. Yes, I guess that's a good reason to point it out, but also Hank's data was stolen from the Mexican car insurance company he called. They got hacked, there was a data leak, and that's how he got contacted. So technically, sorry Bobby, it is your fault. But this starts an argument because Hank points out you forgot the list. If you would have had the list, you would have seen that sunscreen is on there and you wouldn't come back all burnt. Bobby doesn't really take this too well. He doesn't like that he's being talked down to and called incompetent and irresponsible, which causes an argument. Bobby leaves very angrily. Hank looks at the list and realizes even with his set in stone way to be prepared, it wasn't enough. And so he goes to the one place he never thought he would be, Dell's house, where he wants to learn how to not get scammed. He shows a video that is clearly not Hank because we've never seen Hank in that shirt before, saying that he doesn't like propane, which appalls Hank. Dell uses these AI videos to show how easy it is for someone to basically just steal your likeness and your voice and use it to scam others. And then once again, he starts listing off the ways that he's avoided being scammed by deleting all of his aliases, clearing his internet. He even makes a silly joke that, you wanna know who's never been scammed? Cleverton Wiswall, which I'm assuming is one of his many aliases. And you know what, Dale? That's a good name. I wouldn't question it if I saw that name on a registry anywhere. And then he starts listing Hank's social security number to show how much he already knows about him. Hank finally gives in, which leads to the best joke in this episode.
Welcome to the Dale side, Hank.
I love the fact that Dallin starts coughing because obviously he's smoked like his entire life. But don't worry, he has an AI rendered version of himself evilly laughing ready to play. We then get a montage, which this is the second montage of this season, and in this montage we see Hank living the Dale life. And he does some actually pretty clever, simple things you can do to sort of protect yourself, clearing his browsing history, turning location services off. But then he starts going a bit too far. We see that he has Bill, of all people, record his answering machine. That way if you call him, you won't get Hank's own voice answering the phone. Like, he is going full Dale. We then cut to Bobby, who is returning to his apartment with Connie in tow, where he's talking about everything that happened between him and his father. And the lights are out. There's food all over the floor. The refrigerator door is wide open with everything nearly missing. And Bobby's afraid that they've been robbed. They find Joseph face down on the floor in pain, and it turns out that no, he just forgot to pay the power bill, so he ate all the food. Which Joseph continues to be the funniest character when Connie points out that you ate all the food in the cupboards too, and he's like, well, the cupboards were out of power too. Joseph forgot to pay the power bill, and this is the final straw for Bobby, really upsetting him. Once again, funny line from Joseph saying, hey, I'm happy to talk about you being angry right after I throw up again. And then Bobby reaches the conclusion that we all saw when this all started happening, where he is like Joseph is to him, to his dad. Joseph doesn't think things through and bad stuff keeps happening. He realizes that having an argument and telling his father that he can't protect them anymore probably wasn't the right thing to do. So he wants to check in on his dad because Peggy said like, hey, he's been acting very crazy lately. We then see Hank going absolute sicko mode on the paper trail he's left over his life. We see Employee of the Month awards, his energy bill, a Merry Christmas card, being pre-approved for a credit card, which I destroy those anyway too, his Megalomart memberships, his jury summon. You should not destroy that jury summons, Hank, you know that. But he runs them over with his lawnmower and then cooks them on his propane-powered grill, to which we get this amazing shot of him staring down at the flames before Peggy calls him into the house. Peggy says he has a call, to which Hank freaks out and says, I told you not to answer the phone. And she says like, hey, I'm not gonna live my life afraid because you don't want to answer anyone's phone calls. And you know, we've seen this before with Hank. In season 9, Hank forgot to pay his insurance and he became completely terrified of the outside world, locking everything outside, forcing Peggy to stay off the road while her and Luann were out so that they didn't get involved in any accidents. He avoids his friends, he doesn't want to solve any problems, and he barricades himself inside the house. He's absolutely horrified at the idea of what will happen if they don't have insurance. So we see that whenever Hank sort of goes over the deep end about protecting everything, that he seems to like turtle up on himself and try to just deny any way that he can possibly be hurt. And it's interesting to see that this is carried through in his later years. Obviously, Hank is somebody who takes pride in being prepared, thinking everything through logically, and doesn't like the idea of that system falling apart. It breaks the routine of his life. We then see that the person calling is Sylvester Stallone? No, it's Bobby using AI voice manipulation in order to try and tempt Hank into a scam. A very easy to detect scam, so that he can sort of rebuild his confidence. However, it seems like Hank is gonna fall for it until he provides a false movie detail. So Hank calls him out for being a scam. Also, funny enough, Connie says, let's call my dad and pretend to be Jackie Chan, which is hilarious because even though I would say Khan is far more tech savvy than Hank, he would 1,000,000% fall for that. Khan is so full of himself, of course he would think that Jackie Chan would want to call and talk. After helping Hank regain his self-assurance and no longer needing to apply the Dale lifestyle, Bobby helps him set up a password manager, teaches him about two-factor authenticator apps, which yes are annoying, but you should definitely be using those, and uses a metaphor to explain that it's like a lockbox to keep all of your online safety information, which Hank appreciates. It's tying to something that he already used in his everyday life. We then see that Peggy says that the cybersecurity people say you should have a code word in case you think someone calling you is using like an AI voice or is trying to scam you. To which she starts listing off words and we slowly roll into the credits. Now, I would say overall this is a mostly nothing episode. Nothing really advances the plot of Hank and Peggy's retired lifestyle. Nothing really advances the plot of Bobby at the restaurant or Bobby and Connie. But that doesn't mean it's a bad episode. I still think the second episode of the season so far has been the best one, but this one has a lot of heart to it. A big part of the original run of the show was Hank not understanding his son and trying to communicate with him. Him being from a different generation means that he was into different things that Hank would have never been into. Well, now we get to see that entire plot line, but moved so far forward, where now these new generations have created new problems that Hank never had to deal with. Scammers during Hank's time would have had to try very different tactics than what they use today. You could have easily prevented them just by being smart, but now if you don't do simple things like set up defenses on your internet browsers or any of your apps, you can easily just be hacked without you technically doing anything wrong, and then bam, you're scammed. What happened to Hank? What did you think of this episode? Do you think Hank is going to be a lot smarter whenever he deals with another scam? What did you think about Bobby going to Mexico? Honestly, I would have liked to see more of him and Joseph hanging out in Mexico and getting up to hijinks. Either way, until next time, bye!